It's important for youth to be in clinical trials for a couple of different reasons. One, there is a misconception that kids are just small adults. That's not the case. Kids, even at different ages, whether they're pre-adolescent, they're going through puberty, they're young adults, all of those involve physiological changes that you're not going to see in adults. So if you take an adult medication and just reduce it for a child, it may not work the same. Another reason that it's really important for kids to take part in clinical trials is for gathering data about diseases that are very specific only to children. The only way we're going to get that data is if kids participate. Our son has been a part of our particular research center since he was 4 months old, when he was diagnosed with a disease that necessitated an organ transplant. So these are people that we know very, very, very well. It was the idea of a clinical trial was brought up maybe about 6 months before we decided to participate. Then our son had a defining event, an infection in his leg that made him very angry. That infection was a result of a medication that he takes that suppresses his immune system. And he was upset that it interrupted his life, and he was upset that other kids had other infections that could even be worse. And he became very determined. He remembered, our physician had brought this up. Our physician brought it up again since he was going to see us, and at that point our son said, I want to do this. I really want to do this. My husband and I said initially, you know what, we're doing fine. Even though this medication is not the best case scenario for his long-term health, it's still working. We still have him. He's still growing normally. He's developing normally. He leads a relatively normal life, and we want to keep it that way. So we were really reticent to go in there and change anything. But when he was so persistent, we said, you know what, he's getting older. It is his body. He should have a say. It was interesting. So my husband and I both went to that first meeting. We were taken to the research part of the hospital, which we had never seen before, which was interesting. You think you know every part of a hospital. We had never seen that. We met some of the clinical research staff whom we had never met. You know, it was like a basic physical exam for our child, but for my husband and I, the principal investigator, as well as the rest of the research team, clinical and non-clinical, met with us and answered every single question that we had to the best of their ability. Now, the basic tenet of research is we're doing the research because we don't have all the answers. So sometimes when you ask the question, the answer is we don't know. That can be tough, but that's one of the reasons we do research. You'll never know unless you ask. The basic tenet of clinical research is we have a question and we need an answer. So that is when we were really introduced during that first meeting. We were really introduced to clinical research in pediatrics. They assured us that they were our partners in this journey and looked me in the eye, you know, a surgeon that I've known for all of my son's life. And he said, I won't let anything happen to him. And I believed him because I've always had to. He's had my son's life in his hands a dozen times. The biggest concern for us was, is this going to be safe? Everything that our pediatric hospital does, and most hospitals throughout the world do, is to preserve human life. This is another step in preserving our son's life and the lives of kids like him to come. Our clinical research center outlined step by step the safeguards that they had in place, the frequent blood draws, the frequent biopsies, the scans, the questions. All of that was really, honestly, over and beyond really what they needed to do to make sure it was safe, but they didn't want to take any chances. Nobody wants to take chances with the life of a child. So you sign the document and it says, is there a chance of death? Yes, there's a chance of death. there's a chance of death anytime you walk out the door. So you have to suspend some of that a little bit anytime you're doing any kind of research. Clinical trials with kids are as safe as they are possibly going to be. People get into research because they want to help children. They want to find the answers. They're taking care of your precious children. Nothing was ever done with our son without our consent or his assent. When a doctor that you've known for years looks you in the eye and says, "I won't let anything happen to you," you believe them. Yeah, so that was something else that was new to us is clinical assent versus consent. So parents sign a consent document outlining generally they try to keep it at about a 7th to 8th grade reading level, outlining what's going to happen with the clinical trial at every stage. Then the kids sign an assent document, which is a kid under 17, so anybody over the age of about 7 signs an assent document that is written in kid-friendly words. This is what's going to happen to you. We read both documents, of course, but what really struck me was the care that they take to explain to the kids what's going to happen to them. Very honest. Will it hurt? Yes, sometimes it does. Sometimes when you get a needle stick, it's going to hurt. It's very important to be honest with kids, and that's what that clinical assent document does. Yes, before the clinical trial, I was very curious about how the actual protocol was formed, because our son's particular situation, he was withdrawing from a medication that had kept him alive all these years. So I was, asking, what are the steps that you take? How do you step down? How did you develop the idea to step him down incrementally in the way that you did? And I was glad that I asked that question because this study had been done with adults in the past. So they were able to give me some of the data from another U.S. facility where I could read about where they had done this with adults and why it was successful with adults. And that was really, really, really comforting to me. It is really important for a child to ask questions when they are in a clinical trial because it is their body. They should have a say. When our son had his transplant, he was an infant. So we have incrementally released information, age-appropriate information to him over the years. There are some things that you don't tell a 5-year-old that you most certainly would share with a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old. One of the benefits to the clinical trial was helping him to understand his medication better, how it works in his body better. This was an excellent opportunity to have one-on-one FaceTime with a clinician that deeply and uniquely understands the physiology of his medication and his condition. And the only way he's going to get the answers he needs is if he's the one asking the question. I know the way that information is best communicated to me, but his brain works differently than mine. Not only is he on a different, he's at a different age level and a different phase of development in his life, his brain just works differently than mine. So kids definitely need to ask and feel welcome to ask. Nobody ever spoke down to him. I'm so grateful. For our son's clinical trial, we had regular paperwork, regular medication, regular appointments, both for clinic visits, research center visits, and for testing, blood draws. So we had a lot of alarms set on our phones. Cannot overstate the value of the phone alarm. Calendar invitations from our research center, emails from our research center, and phone calls from our research center. We were not going to miss this. Our son has been under sedation and anesthesia several times in his life as part of other procedures. So when he had to have a biopsy or a blood draw or a scan as part of the research study, that was not unusual to us. The frequency was unusual. Initially, that was a little bit of a downer. However, there are freezing sprays and numbing creams that help a lot. Asking the phlebotomist to use a smaller needle, you can do that. And this teaches your child to advocate for themselves as well, which is a huge, very important life skill. You can, something that made our child feel more empowered, he knows where his good vein is. He should speak up and say, hey, the good vein's here. I have a little scar where I had a port. This is where you need to put the needle. Pediatric phlebotomists are very respectful of that, and no, it's very empowering for a child to be able to take, the reins of their own medical care. I would tell parents who were considering participating in a clinical trial to gather as much information as you can, but know that you will never have all the information that you want. The only way to get the information you want is to participate in the trial. Also, you may not get the end result that you're hoping for. We did not. That was difficult. We did get other answers, which were comforting to us, but know that there are no guarantees. Also know that this is your family's way to help other families and change future generations, and that your child can make a difference in a way that no one else can.